Hello, beautiful people. I am Oliver Perrin for Semiagog, joined this evening by JollyScholar888, my friend Gerard, and our subject this evening will be a rambling introduction to processions. It is looking increasingly likely that we will be talking quite a bit about this, perhaps doing further episodes about it. After all, there are so many different forms that processions take across such a vast span of history, of course, including the present, that we're going to have to just sort of dip our toe into different areas of it in this introduction. And then I think what we're probably going to do is carve out some specific buckets, as they like to say, and explore those one by one subsequently. But hopefully this will be entertaining for you. Gerard has done quite a bit of research on this, field work. It informed a great deal of his doctoral thesis. So he comes to this, he comes to the table well prepared to discuss many of these things. And he and I have discussed quite a bit of this in the past. We share our interests overlap quite a bit in this respect. First thing I want to do is shill for him. Check out his channel. It is a new one. It is JollyScholar888, all one word. You can find it on YouTube. He's, in particular, I really like, he's got a series on Pete Seeger and folk music and communism's role in attempting to subvert that, and ideology.
Ideology, I guess, is what it is.
Right, and it's not all about Pete Seeger, as he himself says in many of those clips. But definitely check out his channel. My quick shilling: follow this channel. You can do it on YouTube. You can do it on BitChute, and most importantly, you can do it on Odyssey, which is a channel, a platform that I'm going to be focusing quite a bit more on. Follow this channel as well as a Safer Space, YouTube, BitChute. Only Semiagog is up on Odyssey, but please follow me there. There's also Gab, there's Minds, there's Twitter, and Telegram, where I am increasingly active because it seems unlikely I'll be kicked off there. For those who wish to support the channel, there is GoFundMe and there is Subscribestar. Let me quickly share the beautiful wall of Praetorian Chads who make this channel possible. It's these people, ladies and gentlemen. These are the ones who basically keep this operation going, other than the kind viewers who follow everything. These people deserve, as you can see written here, all of the credit and none of the blame. So I thank them very, very much indeed. Where did that go? I'll take that down. The next thing I should do is show my books very quickly. There's my science fiction books. This is Vinculum. You can get it on Amazon under the name Oliver Perrin. This is a dystopian sci-fi novel. And then there is my collection of poems. This is called Cinders from the Bloomery of Youth. You can find that under Oliver Timken Perrin on Amazon as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, takes care of the initial shilling. Now, this subject,
poetry is great, by the way. I've read them.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. See, that's my peep. He's also an inventor. You see that bike behind him? That's one of his creations. Programmable, all sorts of things. Patented, he's working on it. Yes.
No, I got 6.
Yes. When you're rich,
bikes.com.
When you're rich, as I mentioned, I'd like a Ducati. So, just make sure that's filed away somewhere.
It's done.
Okay, this subject, Gerard and I were talking about this. As I said, our interests overlap quite a bit as regards processions, and we just thought, hey man, let's do this because we've talked about this for quite some time. Let's have a discussion about it. It'd be a straightforward thing because we both have so many thoughts and ideas about this immediately at hand. It doesn't take a great deal of preparation. And then Gerard sent over an outline of potential topics, and I had also laid out some of mine. And it immediately became apparent, as we both know, but just somehow it didn't emerge in my awareness properly. This is a vast subject. It's really just a vast, sprawling subject. But so we're gonna poke at it a bit, as I said, and then we'll move on to in subsequent clips we'll look at specific areas of it. But the first thing I want to cover is why we're talking about this. Why are we talking about processions? Well, go on, Gerard.
No, there's one kind of curious reason. Is that the Academy has done so little work on it. It's almost bizarre because once you study it and you see the impact, the role that processions played in Western civilization is profound. And music, tons of music are all processional music that people aren't even aware of. And so that's one reason right there.
Absolutely, because there's a gap, so to speak. There's a white space. There's an opportunity there that people haven't considered. But here's the important part, I think. I mean, there are many aspects that are important, but first and foremost, I want to underscore the fact that processions are, let us call them, Gerard has different ways of looking at this, and he's got quite a bit more experience researching processions. So, bear in mind that he doesn't, his thinking on it doesn't always overlap fully with mine. But from my perspective, what we're looking at is a cultural technology. It is a set of
self-modification
methods and tools, individually and for groups.
That was a great that was one of the great discoveries of me doing this. Was going, oh my gosh, no wonder they do this. No wonder it's so profoundly important.
And it stretches all across history. I mean, some of the things that we'll tap on, but just to set the stage, we'll come back to these. You've got triumphs like the Roman triumph, right? The guy, coming in through the triumphal gate with his face painted red, and the slave next to him on the chariot whispering in his ear, "You are mortal," so he doesn't forget, with all the captives and booty and treasure. You've got marching in the military, going somewhere, organized and structured through cadence and rhythm. You've got coronations with the processions that go with them. You've got rogational processions. You've got weddings. You've got funerals. You've got what we call today parades. You've got protests that take the form of marches.
Are bizarre as hell. The freak parade.
And I mean, and that's leaving aside some of the more esoteric stuff.
In mythology, right? Because we see that animals have.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah, we're building it on archaic, like behavioral blocks, building blocks,
and
from our DNA past.
And that's the part that I want to underscore here, is that as a cultural technology, as a tool to bring people together and focus their energy and intention, individually and collectively, they are an incredibly powerful tool, which is why we see them used in religion, like Muharram, right, among the Shiites, in procession whipping themselves. That's why we see it in any number of areas, and this is one of Gerard's areas of specialization, so I won't go deep into it, but in any number of areas in the Catholic lay brotherhoods, it's one of the core ways, and Gerard will probably talk about this a bit, one of the core ways that it keeps the bottom up, the genuine aspects of Catholicism as a faith alive. So when
experiential, that's a real good thing for us to discuss, versus the projection, the symbolic projection. It's experiential. It works on the people doing it. It's not just a display. It actually has a powerful effect on the people in the procession
who are participating, no less than the people who are
and no less than the people
right, the people along the processional route. And so before we get into that, because that's what we're about to jump into now, there's this specific aspect that I really want to underscore here. The left does things like it goes out with, or the left, the forces of progress. These shitbirds of one sort and another get out in the world and they have marches and they have protests, and they're all going to like shake their fists and wear their pussy hats, or they're going to have a 1,000,000-man march, or the women's whatever march. And people are doing it. They understand that this is some very old thing. They have a vague sense that this is something that you do. But as Gerard pointed out, academia, they're not looking into it much. And the people who are doing it today, I don't think.
Yeah, so leftover instinct, protest marches, right? That's the only thing the left actually, because it's identity oriented. See, right? They're interested in identity, and that's it.
I think they're mainly interested in mobilizing mobs in order to overthrow our culture.
Right. Well,
even the identity that they pretend to be interested in is always superficial and ends up getting ground up in the blender of mystery meat and the great grayness, all the colors.
It's a thrill. The people involved in it, they get an energy. If you ever in DC, there was I witnessed the the hyenas in the black pajamas coming by, and as cacophonous and kind of like uncoordinated and amateurish that they were, you could tell that they were getting all psyched up.
And that's that aspect that that you were talking about in terms of the experiential dimension, and you can't really get it anywhere else. Not this particular aspect of it. I mean, according to your theory, there are many different ways that human beings can have.
It's so accessible. You just have to have the human body, and if you have the central image, which is always important, that's always good. That's a big, powerful thing with the image kind of focuses the emotion. Remember, these are focused emotions, and then the music that will go with it you have structured sound, structured movement, structured emotions, and these things get focused in a way that is simple, easy to do, and extremely powerful.
And yet, the people who do undertake to do these things, like the forces of progress, as I started to say, they're really just scratching the surface. It's really just the most shitty, superficial, ridiculous caricature of what this cultural technology might afford us as a tool. And that is what I'm trying to come back around to, because we're dealing with a lot of people who think that everything's superficial, everything is socially constructed, it's all an imposition from, you know, culture, it's all a matter of nurture, there's none of nature, it's all, everybody's a tabula rasa, we're just, you know, this, we are the side that believes that there are roots in us that reach deep down into our animal past, no less than the tree that grows up into our spiritual heights or whatever, right? We are the group of people who believe that it's not all arbitrary. We are the group of people who should be taking advantage of these ancient tools, these methods, these cultural technologies in order to push forward our path. And so that's what it's taken me a long time to get it out, but this is what I really wanted to say. The reason that we want to talk about processions is because these are tools. And the vast majority of the people who are using them today are doing so like they've got Alzheimer's or something culturally, so to speak. They half remember everything. They don't even really get it.
Well, if there wasn't a riot to follow, they would be totally incoherent.
Well, they do. To be fair, they
riot, and then that's where the real energy is. But there is, you know, you can tell they're getting into it on the way there.
But how much are they getting into it compared to what they could do based upon what you've seen, for example, in Spain? That this is just
it's nothing.
Everything is superficial. Everything is like a cartoon of a cartoon. So but there's some fundamental things here that we should look at, and we can get this rolling. But I want to make sure it's clear to everyone. The reason that we want to go into this is because this is a powerful tool. This is a powerful tool for what? This is a powerful tool to bring people together, to get them involved in collective action, and to share their own individual experiences. I don't want to get way off into individual, but the bottom line is these are individual experiences. If they weren't, they wouldn't be personal. And if they weren't personal, they couldn't be genuine.
Well, you're also cultivating the emotions. And with that, you cultivate the intellect. The intellect follows the emotion. You structure your emotions, you're structuring your intellect.
And at the same time, these people are operating as a group.
Right.
As well as doing these things individually. And with that, you have this, it's sort of like the bricks and the straw. What is yielded is something that's very strong because both of those aspects are dealt with together. And these people are focused in a particular way. Now, in order to, sorry?
It's very deliberate.
Yes. I mean, and the superficial way that this is covered with a lot of these, you know, marches, as they like to call them, they'll be like, we are marching to the such and such. And so the idea is, well, we go to this point, and this point is our destination, and then we will chant something, and maybe we'll hold signs, and that's about that. That's as far as they go. So in order to start the discussion, to start the consideration, so that we can begin to recognize how powerful this is, and how useful it is, and how much we should be thinking about it to employ it. Let's start with the basics. The basics of a procession is going somewhere. Now, there are other levels and dimensions of it that Gerard is going to get into, but the basic idea is a group of people go in a direction, and they're going towards something, or they're going away from something. And usually they're doing both, either in reality, and of course in reality because you're covering physical ground, but at the same time, metaphorically, you could be going away from something and going towards something. And I would argue, and I'd ask you your thoughts on this, Gerard, that ultimately the procession at its deepest roots is a stress response. Now, if you take a look at hominid ancestors on the open savannas of it must be Africa, because we're all from Africa, right? Take a look back anywhere in the world you would like, and take a look at our hominid ancestors and imagine that they're in an area where another tribe comes in and is a threat to them, or where a drought has come in and they have no food, or where a volcano has erupted and the sky is filled with ash and the animals are fleeing, right? They need to leave. And the most fundamental human response to that stress is go somewhere else. in that respect,
or form yourself in a structured form and resist. See, the taking of territory and the defending of territory is one of the roots, because you're structuring, and the animals do it too. You line up, you have the music really powerful. You line up and you let them know you're holding your ground. You're not moving.
Right, and I was actually going to get to that. There are basically three. There are three areas that three ways that this can be conceived, because remember, we're dealing with something that is individual and it's also collective. Now, under individuals, when they're faced with stress, what do you have? You have fight, freeze, flight. These are these primary responses. So in the case of a group of people, I mean, because it's pretty straightforward with individuals, right? A squirrel thinks something's after it, it freezes, right? Because the freeze response might make it unnoticeable, right? It might not trigger any response. So it's just going to be really quiet, right? Fight is very clear. Flight is very clear. Fight, freeze, flight. On a collective level, you got the idea of fleeing, right? So think about like a Catholic rogational procession, like after the Black Plague in the middle of the 14th century, hit a number of these Italian city-states. Vast numbers of the population of these cities died, and everyone was freaked out. They're like, God is judging us. So they immediately broke out almost spontaneously into rogational processions. And they penitentially would
processions, and they were called militant, which is interesting. You can talk about that. Why they were called that? Right,
and I'll just lay this last piece out. The second one is freeze, where you come together, and I mean, are you fleeing? Are you fighting? If you're going in a circle, you know, you could argue that's freezing, staying in a place, focusing the attention.
Station.
And moving through stations.
Station usually are going hand in hand.
And then the last one is fight, where we get marching, right? And you get the idea of marching bands, or you get military parades, or you get the idea just of soldiers in training who are using cadence to build their morale.
Formation. The way you move forward towards the enemy in formation, time, structure, there's music, you're structured, you're moving towards them, you build up the morale, and you build up the tension in the music. That's also a root of what we call processions.
Right. Now, some of these, it all overlaps. So certainly when you're talking about things.
But it's human formation, moving in formation, structuring emotion.
Right. For collective action.
Yes.
But without forgetting about the dimension that is personal and individual, because there's that, particularly in the religious sense.
Absolutely, completely. It's self-modification. It's something that we really talk about. It's how groups self-modify, and we can look at that, especially when we talk about penitential, even the ecstatic ones, the transcendence of the self. Believe it or not, when you look at Dionysian type of processions, the individual is key.
And you can't really get around it. If you want it to be genuine, and that at the same time is not to dismiss the whole collective action aspect of it, which is fundamental to it as well. Well, then I've been talking a lot, Gerard. I want to talk a little bit about animals. I know you had looked at some ways how this appears in animal behavior. You know, I've looked quite a bit at the marking of territory and patrolling routes. And I know that overlapped. You know, we talked years ago about the house,
the marquee. As the marches.
Right, and marches being borders.
To the unknown, to the border, to the leman.
Right. So the march is the border.
And you mark territory in that sense too. Even though it seems invisible, you're occupying it and you're marking it.
Mark, march, border. And so for people who don't know about this, I know Gerard well knows about it, but take a look, for example, at how you'll have a parade of Protestants in Northern Ireland. And they'll march a certain route territory to contest.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Right, and it can cause all kinds of problems. And I'm sure that the Irish nationalists also, I'm sure, have their own parades, and they clash. Right, so you can see the way in which this is the marking of territory, how it is martial, how it involves marching in order to mark
they march
the
right
borders.
Up to the neighborhood, or sometimes even into, if they get really bold, playing their bagpipes and drums. And then they will do the same thing come right close to their territory, sounding this bagpipes, the drums, their song.
They're actually using bagpipes in Ireland?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure the musical dimension
Northern
of
Ireland is Scotch-Irish.
Oh, the orange side. Yeah, I was thinking about the,
Yeah, the bagpipes in Ireland are huge.
And everybody's got bagpipes, whether they have a bag or not. You know, the Zorna and the Mesmer, you know, are basically just bagpipes without a bag. And they move people, and there's a reason. But so you've got that musical dimension. You've got the idea of patrolling territory. You know, so I kind of touched on the ways in which this overlaps with people and with animals. But now I want to turn it over to you, and just if you could talk about the animal side of it first, just so that we can cover.
Quick, just so people know that we're building on archaic building blocks. If you go online, you can find this. The lions were approaching the bison, the buffalo, you know, and there was a calf in contention. They were contesting, and rather than fleeing, the buffaloes all lined up right around the calf, and they faced off the lions. They lined up and they just held their ground. They wouldn't move. And the lions kept deciding, well, we're going to try this or we not. And finally they backed off. Another one is when monkeys go on these rampages attacking. There's a certain formation of how they do this even when they're going through the trees. So they move in formation. Then we know birds do this, right? Birds are obvious. Now, of course, a lot of it's aerodynamics, but the lead is at the front. They move in formation, and you've seen so many creatures and fish. They do it in a hive mentality that is uncanny. So moving in formation goes back in DNA all the way to the insects. I've seen ants do this.
It's absolutely pre-rational. It's beneath the rational mind, and that is something that I'm glad you brought it up, because that's something I wanted to touch on. One of the things about, like, when we talk about you know, you got the idea of herds, right? And herd instinct, right? And I've used the metaphor before in the past. You know, you're talking about how the herd's kind of chilling, and, you know, you've probably got a few alpha males within the herd who kind of have their heads up and they're looking around to see if some lion's trying to, as you said in your example, trying to pick off a calf or whatever. And they're alert, right? But there comes a moment, and you can see it with these herds. There's no way that every animal in that herd saw what was coming. But there's some awareness. And for all I know, it could be super high-speed pheromones. I don't know. But you see a ripple roll across that herd, and suddenly the whole thing's in motion.
Right.
Nobody gave a signal. They just moved. And now think about what we hear about when there's a panic and a stampede and people get crushed underfoot and this sort of thing, right? One of the things I wanted to point out, I want to underscore this here for our purposes in terms of it being a cultural technology, something that the right can use, is that there is a certain way in which there's almost like a vacuum. You know how you get a siphon started and it just flows? You know, you have lots of people who've written books about crowds. There's that famous remark of a certain mid-century Austrian painter who happened to be vegetarian, who talked about how crowds are always feminine. Now, that's a apocryphal quote. I don't know if it's really from him, but the observation is true, that there's a responsive aspect to people who have collectivized and are in a big crowd. That's why you get things like stampeding, or you get mobs that go feral, you know, in terms of a lynching or something, when they all become infuriated, right? There's in some sense, whatever the emotional state is of one, it can be spread, or somehow an emotional state spreads across the entire group in a way that is sub-rational. And now there are many ways we could talk about this.
I could give a really good example of how it's cultivated too. Like in Spain, there's a couple of examples. I was there, that it's uncanny. It's called controlled chaos. People like us who aren't used to this, we're convinced something's bad is going to happen. This is getting freaky, but it never does. Part of that is a homogeneous group still. They know each other. They even when they know each other personally, like at the Rocio, you'll see that the people are, you know, they're from all over Spain. But this is embedded. So I'll give you a quick example. The first time I encountered it was a procession along the River Darro, which is in Granada, along the river. And there's sea canyons. And this church became very important to me. I didn't know it at the time at all. And I was following the procession, you know, doing my video and my photos. And it went inside what I now know is the church of San Pedro y San Marco. And we go inside, and it's a courtyard. And I go, okay, well, I'm following them in the courtyard, and, you know, and then there's the procession, the big, by the way, the procession, the focal of this emotional structuring is, in this case, the Cristo, which is a big crucified Christ. Now, remember, in Holy Week, they depict all the different aspects of the Passion. So one will be the crucified, one will be the three falls, where he falls three times, one will be in front of Pilate, So it's like the gospel all over the town for a week. The whole city shuts down, crowds are everywhere. So this one happened to be, it was a Cristo. And so crucified. So he's coming in, it goes inside this courtyard. And I'm saying, oh, this is cool, man. I'm getting pictures. A lady starts, it stops, and a young lady starts singing. They call it saeta for those who've never, but it's a very intense song. And wouldn't you know it, my camera's gone dead. You know, this is my first time ever doing this stuff. So I made a bunch of mistakes that I could just kick myself. But she sang really well, and she had a motorcycle helmet in her hand. So she had ridden her moped there. So she sings this really well. That's, oh man, everybody's clapping. And then more people are coming in. And then more people are coming in. And more people are coming in. And there's no place for this thing to go. And suddenly people, and now I see it as kind of theatrical. The women next to me is going, oh, you know, she's like my baby, you know, she got a baby in her carriage. And they're all, you know, you get this feeling that it's like, oh shit, man, this could get bad. And remember, these processions in a homogeneous culture like Spain, they don't need police. I mean, can you imagine a crowd this large in any city in America without tons of police? There's no police. You look around, there's none. So this thing gets crazy. And all of a sudden, just when you think, uh-oh, what did I get myself into? The procession, the Cristo, they pivot it around, and it creates a motion around the courtyard. And the Cristo moves right out the gate, and suddenly the whole tension just goes, and it's gone. And I was just, you know, this is the first time I ever saw it. So I said, well, that was freaky. You know, I was thinking, well, maybe, you know, I thought it was a one-time thing, and well, thank God they knew it, you know. And then I witnessed it again. Then I witnessed it again. And then I realized, oh, no, this is something these people do. And one of them is called sublime savagery, where they get, you know, just almost in a frenzy. But the Andalusians know to never go past that mark. They never go into losing it, but they go right to the edge, and then they back off. They go right to the edge, and then they back off. And it has nothing to do
and what function,
right?
I want to come back around to what I originally wanted to underscore, but first I want to ask you, what is the function of that? Why do they do that?
They're cultivating the sense of the chaotic and structuring it so they can walk up to the abyss as a group and not back and not lose it. It's totally instinctive. They just know to do this, and they've done it for centuries. It has nothing to do with Christianity, right? I mean, this is not a, you know, it's got nothing to do with Christianity. You wouldn't know they even did it unless you were there. And then you see that, and then you go like on the Rocio, you see it again, you go to another, then you read another anthropologist, and he's talking about it. And a lot of they hadn't connected the dots that this is done all over Andalusia. And it's part of the structuring of emotion is to destructure it, right? Structure and anti-structure, which was Victor Turner, and then I took it a bit further. But they're structuring the emotions, but the chaotic emotion is part of pushing the emotional boundaries. And then I don't know how far you want to go into this, right? Because if you look at consciousness as related to, as a product of the emotions from the guy, Damasio, you see how the power of this and the power of music and the power of these processions in human self-modification.
Well, let's stick a pin in it and say that there's an enormous opportunity inherent in this that has been used since time immemorial by different groups in order to shape collective identity and will and experience and shared experience.
And identity would be almost the superficial result. They're not really doing that, but it is a result of it.
Right.
They're doing deep into the deep work. They're messing and cultivating their emotions and their group, their consciousness. And we could talk about more of the consciousness when we go to like the Holy Week. I mean, something like with the collective self-flagellation, which is totally misunderstood by people, but that's another where you're deliberately cultivating the self and the emotions.
Okay, well, in this case, what I had really wanted, and this is that was a nice example of it. That's a little bit further up the food chain, literally, because what I was talking about was this herd instinct and the way the animals move together, the way in which there is no verbal communication required for it, obviously, because you don't have, like, for example, talking bison, right? We're talking, reindeer or whatever. But the point is that they just know and they move. And so if you want to move people literally in a direction together towards tangible real world ends, but at the same time, if you want to move them emotionally through shared experience that has this sort of depth and profundity that it's difficult to find in other ways, then this is a great way to do it. And I brought up the example of the business of how herds move, because, you know, we have this expression, oh, I just got caught up in it, right? And there's this idea of, oh, riots, people kind of go half crazy, right? There is a way in which these processions can be used to get people caught up in a shared feeling that
But
still
structure.
has its
The
structure.
genius of procession is it's structured. They don't go crazy. They don't.
Well, let's put it literally. They're going somewhere.
Well, yeah, but the Dionysians don't. That I can point out.
No, but even the Dionysians, they're physically going somewhere.
Well, they're moving. Yeah.
Yes, and that's the metaphor,
Right. And that's
in it,
they're structured
of the structure, because they're going together.
They're going somewhere mentally and emotionally, way more than physically.
And yet you could not do away with the physical analog, because it's a part of the process, from walking in step and the rhythmic aspect
They're
to
not
it.
going to such and such a place. It's not a way to get from A to B. Like, we need to go to the next town down, and so we're going to go in procession. That's another kind of procession. The Dionysian is not doing that.
But it doesn't matter, because they're still moving.
Right. They are moving, but I'm saying the objective has, the other processions are going to a place. That's what I'm trying to draw the distinction. There are the processions that
Absolutely,
are going
but even when they're not going to a place, they're moving together, and they're quite literally going somewhere, even if it's nowhere.
That's what I'm saying. When that's somewhere in these kind of processions is totally emotionally and mentally.
Right, or otherworldly, so to speak. Yes.
Yeah, they are bringing out, structuring powerful emotions, and they could end up almost anywhere. But like the Dionysian procession, they don't even know where they end up. They end up somewhere in the forest, you know, in some kind of, you know, controlled.
Well, that could be out of control chaos, because the tradition, at least as it's come down to us for Dionysian processions, is women dismembering men. Maintenance just, you know, fucking ripping them to pieces. So.
Right, but I would read that cautiously differently. You know, you're looking at a myth, but the myth is a result of something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they were not aware of people becoming hysterical and going crazy. I mean, they're aware of that. The Dionysian tradition, though, is not that they go out of. Well, again, it's pointing to something very primal, very real.
Right, and we would have to have a time machine and really great spectacles on in order to be able to go back and distinguish the metaphor from the.
Go to the Salida that I was talking about earlier. We can talk about some other time, but that's pretty damn close.
Right. Well, is there anything else that we want to cover other out of this, the sort of ethological building blocks? I mean, the main point that I wanted everybody to take away from this is that this is something that's not limited to human beings. Though arguably dimensions of it and aspects of it are things that are right. But the roots of it,
deliberate self-modification.
Right.
That's it's self-modification. The group is self-modifying.
Yes, and the individuals that are comprised by that group.
Yes.
And there's the dimension that I wanted to tap. First off, just make sure it's absolutely clear that this is something that extends back further than just human beings. Again, we've got aspects that are unique to humans, but the roots of this behavior, right? And that's why I tapped the whole business at the outset.
Which is a kind of
animal behavior, the study of animal behavior.
It's not really ritual the way we think of it, but
it's ritual as Tin Bergen and Konrad Lorenz talked about it. Ritual in the sense of it's encoded behavior that has communicative value. But the point is that this is, I keep hammering this because the forces of progress are all talking about how it's a superficial imposition and that it's all nurture and that it's all imposed from the top down. It's a cultural thing. You know, the system did it to us. You know, it's systemic this and systemic that. And if you just raised them differently, they'd be different. You know, this is the things that we're talking about here are things that go far back into our shared animal heritage is one thing I wanted to cover. The other thing I wanted to cover and did is that it's a stress response in many respects in its roots.
And the animals can be, but that's one. That's one.
Well, hunger is a stress that has to be answered. A threat from people trying to take over your territory is a stress that can be answered.
But also,
environment.
they also will spontaneously attack. They will move into other people's territory, like apes, and actually move into them deliberately and systematically move into another territory and invade it.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you know, but we get into the business of trying to determine whether or not that too could be as. Pardon me.
What are you drinking?
I'm drinking bullet apple juice.
Oh, it's not alcoholic, that one. Okay.
It's apple juice.
Whiskey, locally produced.
Oh, locally produced apple juice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
I like that for you. Very nice. So yeah, and the other thing, you know, stress response, animal behavior, and the rest, we've sort of hammered on it. This can all be used as techniques if we have a deeper understanding of it. So let's move on to some other things that you had laid out here. You know, we had talked a little bit about mark and march, and actually we just now talked about penetrating territory. We talked about marking borders. You know,
the Lehman, right? That Gennep talked about. Tribals and stuff. You've heard everyone's heard of no man's land, right? So it's a common thing, no man's land.
Well, that's, you know what, actually a march, a border, and particularly border marches is the idea of a no man's land. What makes it a march is not that it's not just that it's a border, it's that it is therefore contested.
Exactly. And between borders is the no man's land. And then it also took on
surrounding the border. Surrounding the border is the no man's land.
Yeah, well, between your border and theirs also.
But I mean, it depends on how you want to like conceive of it. Is it a line with a zone on either side, or is it two lines with a space in the middle? 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Space in the middle is how I was seeing it just then. Yeah.
Right. Whatever it is, that's the marches. But go on. The Lehman.
So the march from your center to the march to the marquis. The marquis is the one that watches the borders, who stands on the borders. In Europe, the Marquis de Sade was very famous because his father was, or the grandfather was a great warrior against the Muslims, and that's why he was awarded Marquis.
Is that where Marquis comes from? Because I know about letter of mark, but let's go see about Marquis.
Yeah, Marquis, March, and Mark are all related. This is one of the things that you and I looked at a long time ago.
So it's like a border reaver. Yep, there it is. Medieval Latin marca, frontier territory, march. Yeah. So
if you're a Marquis, you are very much
also Margrave.
That is actually still warriors.
Right.
Because you're on the front lines out there protecting the territory of the people. So it was a very prestigious nobility to be a Marquis. And that's why de Sade got away so much for so long, because he was a Marquis. But
yeah, even though that was much later along with his family, but yeah.
Yeah, because he came down from that family. So this marching to the Lehmans has a whole lot, everything from the exact physicality that we just talked to the Lehmans of the border of knowledge, to the Lehmans of the border of the emotions. And you'll see this actually come into processional practices that are not rooted anymore to defending territory, attacking territory, but they can combine them. One of the examples is there's the Virgen de Rocío, but there's also the Cabeza. I've looked at a lithograph of the Virgen de la Cabeza, and it's out in the middle.
Hang on. You got to tell everybody who doesn't speak Spanish or is not.
Oh, sorry, the Virgin of the, we don't want to say head, but it's promontory, right? And the promontory is out there in Jaén, and you go up there, and this would take me too long to tell because it's a very fast.
So it's a representation of the Virgin Mary on high ground.
Well, no, it's a procession to, right? She's kept there. That's right, in the monastery. Then there's a whole mythology that Turner pointed out in the Shepherd Cycle. But you take the Virgin in procession all the way out, and it's way out. We'll go back. Maybe we'll get to that. Beaches into the forest, but you take it out to the border. And in the day, this was it's as old as the 1400s, and at that time they're fighting the Moors, right? So they're pushing them back. And one of the things that the Spaniards would do, and likewise the Moors had their own way of doing it, when you push that border, you would then plant a virgin. There would be her own image, this is Virgen de la Cabeza, and she is now the patroness of this territory. This land is hers, claiming it for the Tierra de Santa Maria, the land of St. Mary.
So we can see the conjunction again of the marching
to
the marches, which is the border, where it is marked with the
Marked.
placement of a statue.
And it's the emotional, spiritual part that's done together, building on each other. Because when they go there year after year, now it's not on the border of anything, but it is out in the boonies. And they go out there and it's very ecstatic too. But when you look at this lithograph, it looks like an armed camp. And you'll see why that is, because of the brotherhoods and their encampments. And when you look at it, you look at this and you say, it almost looks like an encamped army that marched to this place.
Because they're ritually sort of recapitulating. They're enacting that. They're just a non-military version. May I stick in a little parentheses here for our viewers? Some people may have come in, I don't know how many have been with us since the beginning, how many are coming in and dropping out, but this is a good point to underscore what's been happening over the last 5-6 years, certainly in the United States, across much of Europe. You see people get together to march. They got pussy hats on, or they got Black Lives Matter banners, or whatever it is, right? And they march into areas that have landmarks that are very important, like statues. Just like the statue of Mary that Gerard was talking about, that is raised in a certain point to show that this territory has been taken.
Right.
Now, these same people are using this half-consciously. They're handlers. They're half-witted betters, who at least have half a wit, who direct them to do these things, have some sense of what they're doing. They want to take down the landmarks and thereby break down the borders. So we can see that our borders are under attack, our statues are being taken down, and people are marching in the streets. And we're half conscious about it. We're like, oh, that's a freedom of speech.
And when the Moors would attack and take territory, the Christians would hide these statues because they knew that they would be desecrated. And then the whole thing of the mythology is, oh, they're miraculously discovered again and replaced where they need to be. So you can see this, that the symbol, just as you said, the statue, it marks a mental, it's not marking territory anymore necessarily, but it's
just like we talked about.
Emotional structured state. And the idea is to desecrate it. When you do that, you're attacking the psyche of your enemy.
Right. And also quite literally attacking the territory and the landmark. That's what everybody has to understand, that it really is these things simultaneously. It has the entire dimension that you're talking about, but that's what's so beautiful about it. It also has the physical dimension. The metaphor is anchored in reality. And
absolutely. And have you ever seen the marches that the Poles do? There's a Polish National Day. See, there in the Catholic countries, all the Protestant countries, or the ones overrun by Marxism, these things don't happen like they used to. These things were huge in the streets. The whole city participated in them. So we don't see that. Even if you go to Europe today, you'll rarely see it. It still happens, especially outside of the big cities. But in Poland, places like that, it's still huge.
Oh, well, you've seen their I think it's for their national holiday.
That's what I'm talking about.
The marches with the red flares that just you're like hundreds of thousands.
It has on you. We're not even Polish, and it affects us.
Yeah, you're like,
when I saw the American flag.
Yeah.
Have you seen that there were Americans in it, or Poles carrying American flags because they think very highly of us? So in that march, you see the American flag.
Right, but you see a whole lot of red and white for the Polish colors, man. Yeah.
I mean, they can see it, right? For me,
they can turn them out.
Yeah, the emotions that run through you when you witness this is intense, and we're not even there. We're not even Polish.
And that is something I wanted to underscore the relevance in terms of our present events, because again, if anybody didn't get the memo, the point is that by understanding what this tool is and crafting events, we're not just having this discussion. I mean, part of it is because it's fun to talk to Gerard. I hope that there will be some few people who will be interested in this, but this isn't just a navel gazing exercise. The whole point with this is that people can sit down in a room and say, oh, we're going to have a march, except we're going to think about all the history of processions and the symbolism and the meaning as we craft this march and the movements that go through it and the message that is associated with it.
Structured. I've thought of that a lot, of exactly doing that in today's society and the effect it would have, since nobody does it anymore, because it'll be instinctive. When you see it, it'll hit you. Absolutely.
And because it's part of our animal inheritance, at least some levels of it.
These things in Western Europe are huge throughout the history, even into the Indo-European peoples. The procession is profoundly important.
Absolutely. I mean, and you had these are also, that's another thing that we've forgotten in large part. You know, in the old days, you had I can't remember the Turkish words for it now, but I was doing some translation that deals with this. In the wintertime, you come down to the lowlands, right, with your cattle. But in the summertime, you go to your high elevated pastures to get away from things like mosquitoes and to get away from the heat. So a lot of people think of nomads, and they don't understand that in reality, true nomads are very rare. For the most part, what you're dealing with are people who move in a cycle between locations.
Right. And they're
just like animals do.
Enter their territory when they're there. You don't do that. To think that they don't claim territory is ridiculous. Of course they do.
Right, but they move in a cycle.
Right.
And it's or like look at some of the steppe dwellers, right? They would move all over the place, but the one territory, if you wanted to nail them or piss them off and really rile all of them up and bring them together, would be to attack their burial mounds, right? Just because they move in a general area doesn't mean that there aren't fixed points that are of great importance to them within that framework, and they move along routes. And they patrol those routes just like the marches along the margins. And
that's what we have procession and stations.
Yeah. Well, why don't you talk a little bit about that then?
Well, let's take for instance the old we said the rogation ones that happened after the plague, and then we can also talk about
during the plague.
Right, during the plague, they would go in March. They would go in procession singing, and people feast. I saw this stupid, obviously another, leftist version of it. I think it was PBS or whatever. They did a documentary, and they were just grunting and hitting themselves like animals in the dirt and stuff. Like, that's not how it was. Not at all. And in fact, these people knew it wasn't that way.
What did I miss? Who was doing this? In what context?
The rogational pilgrimages. They would go to the town square. See, they went from town to town.
Was it Christian?
It was Catholic, completely Catholic. This is during the plague, the medieval plagues.
Okay, I'm sorry.
13th century, 14th century is when they were called militatis, because when you see a procession coming your way, it is automatically they're taking territory just by the version that they're doing it. They're structured, they're organized, and they're coming your way. So to you, regardless of what their inner procession is going on, they look militant to you until you know better.
Hence militatis.
Right. So they would go from town to town. They were singing, and they were saying such beautiful music. See, this is where the part where they wanted to denigrate them in this so-called documentary. But the fact that these so-called historians knew about these rogational pilgrimage processions means they looked at the only sources there are. And those sources would have told them that, no, the music was so beautiful that several composers walked along with them or at the stations, at the towns, and wrote them down. So they're singing beautifully, and they're also doing the penitential, right? And so it could be whipping. They're called whipping songs. And so they had them whipping themselves and screaming and yelling. No, that's not how it was done. And you'll see this all over, even in Italy and Spain today. No, you won't. No, you won't. It's very rare. So let's take the penitential, right? You're moving along, but the idea is they're structured. They're singing. It's very organized. They're structuring their emotions, pleading to God to intercede. If you think it's ridiculous or not, that's nonetheless. It was not a mad bunch of frothing at the mouth, people laying in the dirt, screaming and yelling. The music was so beautiful that people actually, we have collections, they're called whipping songs. So let's look at Saeta, Semana Santa. They're going along, say this is 250, 200 years ago. They all have, the reason they wore the hoods.
Hang on, just for our viewers. Semana Santa is Holy Week. The Saeta means arrow, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what it, yes.
And so as the procession's going by, for people who don't understand, it's a somber procession with music.
But the Saeta is not what they're singing as they're moving, right?
Right. I was just about to say, the procession moves along, and at different points it stops. And as it stops, you've got like a float that's being carried with a representation of Christ or the Virgin, or and as it stops, they'll still be rocking just slightly with the rhythm. And so there on the street in the darkness, there's the long procession, and some of these people are from the lay brotherhoods, and they're carrying the weight, and the people are very devout, and it's in the darkness of this of the night, but with people's lights and the rest. And everyone comes out on their terraces and their balconies, and they literally sing to the figure of the Christ or the Virgin. So go on, sorry.
Yeah, Exactly. And these songs have cultivated through the years, and they're powerful, intense. I mean, they're operatic now. But, and another thing is that when these processions are moving, when they get to when they do their stops, it's controlled in the sense that they're not just, the band is playing, so there's music, and then they stop, and then comes the singing.
Right. But again, they never fully stop. They're still marking the time ever so slightly.
Unless they're resting, then they'll put it down and they'll switch teams, because it takes about 15 people of the costaleros to lift this thing up. They're so big and heavy.
Right. But there is, what I want to underscore is that there is reality intercedes and causes them to have to.
They even judge them and applaud their rhythms. They get a good rhythm going with the.
But there's a sense of showing that the power is still there, that it has been intentionally controlled, just like in flamenco. I always used to talk about how I hate the fact that with Latin dancing, it's fucking hip wagging bullshit. Whereas in flamenco, it's about control, explosion, close again, control. And so when they stop at each of these positions, because we're of course talking about stations, I'm sure you'll come back to that. They show that the energy, the power is still there. The rhythm is still there. They're holding it. They're waiting. It's gone low, so you can hear the singer. Right. But then when the saeta is done, the power comes up, they move again.
Yeah, yeah.
But go back on stations.
Okay, so say this is 200 years ago. They are, in fact, whipping themselves. Not everybody. There's different kinds of people in the procession, right? There's the band. There's the women who do I skip the word. They're the mourners, and they're dressed in mourning. And then there's the penitentes, and they're cloaked, and I mean they have robes.
Those great hoods.
Yeah. They have the hoods, right? Which freaks a lot of people out now when they see those. So they're doing this, right? But it's controlled, and the reason they're hooded is because you're not supposed to be bragging to the people. Oh, look at me! I'm so virtuous. Watch me really smack myself. The whole idea is you become anonymous, and it's you and your ability to withstand the pain as you slowly apply it over 3 hours, 4 hours. Some of these things go on for 6. And but
humility as well.
To your back, but you're not going to, if you're doing this and you're smacking the shit out of it, you wouldn't last. The whole idea is you're building up what we know in esotericism, right? You can go the path of what would be the harsh path and the soft path. That's not the words, but stern and
virtue and vice, right? The way that is more challenging.
No, I was more in physicality. There's pleasure and pain, more like that. So pain, when you get to a certain threshold, can become pleasure, or it can put you in a state of mind where you come with what in biogenetic structuralism would be called quiescence. And so they knew this through centuries. This was like I said, it's a technology. It was a way of self-modification and of cultivating the self. So the idea was you would reach a certain state where you could commune with God or your saint or some higher revelation, whatever. But that's what his purpose was, not to show off to everybody about how virtuous you were. So that's why they would cover themselves. And so would control it. You weren't just beating the shit out of yourself. You're making enough pain that you can last, but it's really, by the 3 hours later, you're hurting. But can you move through the pain?
And how does this relate to stations? Because I like the idea of these positions along the route, which I wanted to tap.
Yeah, well, in the militant ones, in the Semana Santa, the way they're doing it, these are stations. They're movable stations, right? All of these stations of the cross which is the gospel, which was the passion, are actually represented by different movable processions. So for a week, you have the gospel being enacted before your very eyes every day.
Perhaps I'm misunderstanding, because I was thinking of stations along a route.
Yes, that's the other one, right? Then there's the stational like the Stations of the Cross, which is based on this variation. They would go chanting and singing, and then they'd stop at station number 1. And this is what happened. Maybe it's the time he's before Pontius Pilate or whatever.
So what you have with these stations is the stages of a story, which are marked at each of those points.
And in Jerusalem, they go to the actual place, right? But they said because of the Turks, they couldn't. And so but station and procession is a fundamental instinct as well. You move, you station, even if you're nomadic. then you stop and you burn a circle. You cultivate whatever you're cultivating. Then you move again and you move. So state and procession are two, and you can look at it in a long term. We say we're sedentary people, but notice the instinct to get up and what we call go on vacation or go traveling.
Right.
So I'm just looking at that. That's like another large scale of the same thing. And nomads will do the same thing as you pointed out, right? Nobody just eternally moves. So this station and procession are intimately linked.
So what could we carry away as a lesson to back up from the stuff that you and I enjoy so much, which is the that esoteric fringes of everything, which we love to delve into. If we just turn away from that only momentarily, because I dig this stuff too. What lessons could we carry away from this for people who wanted to put together processions today, right? What is the lesson as regards to the stations?
If we're doing the stations would be, in this sense, not as much, because we're actually, you'd have to think about it.
Couldn't you travel around a city, for example?
The city, and we're going to bring this powerful image and assertion of ourselves and our emotions. Let's say it's a political, let's just say it is. Then you would go and come up with, like you said, in the Holy Week of Spain, you stop to hear some individual pour out their heart. Okay, so what would be the equivalent of that?
You could, for example, have a route through a city, and say one of the first places you stop is in front of the statue of Stonewall Jackson, right? And then someone gets up who's a well-known speaker and stands up near the statue and exhorts the crowd to remember these characteristics represented by this person.
And possibly in song with a rhythm. Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Right. Or what it is. And then you move on to the next one, right?
Exactly.
But the next one, you've got a figure who is well known as being a particular type of Christian who has, what is it? The Sacred Harp Singers, right? That you've told me so much about.
Yeah. So
you could have, I'm just pulling this out of nowhere. Who knows if there's a statue of someone, but you could have that kind of singing at that spot that everyone would enjoy. And then you move to the next one. And this is something that I wanted to talk about, because understanding what it is that moves people and what these ritual elements are is, and it looks like we might have lost Gerard there. Hopefully he'll be back in with us momentarily. Understanding these elements and how they all come together and how they work is very, very important, because if you understand the background for it, and you're being clever, and you're being careful, and you're thinking about how best to achieve a thing, then, for example, you might look at the Tiki Torch March, and you might say to yourself, it might be better for everyone if we try to get the same result out of candles rather than tiki torches. Because if we use candles, then it has the feeling of penitence and inward focus and peacefulness and spirituality. Now, I get it. It doesn't have the excitement of carrying around torches at night. The problem is that if you're carrying around torches at night, you've got the whole issue of, people associating that with, hang on just a second. This is Gerard. Hello? I could see you now. The camera's working. So you have the idea of sorry, ladies and gentlemen, you have the idea of moving around with tiki torches. That's carrying torches. That's exciting. It definitely excites young men and makes them want to get all focused and ferocious. But in terms of the optics, as they like to say, it's got a number of pitfalls. So, for example, if you think about the kinds of things that we're discussing here, like moving through different areas in different ways and being very careful and specific about it, you might say to yourself, well, maybe we won't go with tiki torches. Maybe we'll use candles, because candles will seem peaceful, whereas tiki torches will seem violent and aggressive and bring to mind violent mobs.
Oliver, when I think of procession, it's like glorious. I'm talking about at the right moment. You got a person in front with antlers, and he lets out a beautiful scream. And when he does that, the rhythm comes in, and all the spears go up all at the same time.
Yeah, but that sort of procession,
but again,
baby steps.
We're making a point, and so it's powerful. And
absolutely, but
one of the key things that we forget, we're not asking anyone's permission.
Yes, but there is a time and a place for everything.
Right.
So there are ways in which to say we're not asking for anyone's permission, but not inviting or not laying it out in such a fashion that it becomes counterproductive. So I'm not just here to be like an optics cuck. I get the whole point about not asking for permission, but there are some ways of doing things that are better than others at specific times and or for specific purposes. I see Enza is in the house. It's been a while. Anyway, we had talked about stations. We're at the halfway point. We've got a number of different things that we could go into next, Gerard. And again, the whole subject here, this is something I want people to think about. I want everybody who's checking it out to
research. There's so much. It's so rich. Well, we could talk about, if you don't mind, let me just mention this one. When we look at if we see the emotions too, and there's a connection, DiMaggio and others have come to the realization that there's no such thing as consciousness without the emotions. There's no intellect in an emotional vacuum. So the reason I bring this up, what these processions do also is their cultivation of focused, structured emotions that have extended the emotional repertoire of early humans. And in late humans, we still extend it, and music has been produced by these processions that people forget about. Now you look at just some of the basic emotions. You have funeral, right? So all that's a funeral, dirge music. Now remember that funeral music doesn't have to be what we call sad. In New Orleans, it's happy. It's just funeral music. It's its own category. It's not sad or happy. It's funeral music.
Listen to Mozart's Requiem, for crying out loud. Sure.
Yeah. Wedding music.
Right now, I want to underscore. You know this, but so that our listeners do understand it. Funerals have processions. Everybody gets together. You feel free to turn the ringer off.
Yeah, I've got two of these. They're signals to me. Sorry.
Everybody gets together and goes into a procession for a funeral. Now, these days, they tend to do it, except with the pallbearing specifically, they tend to do it.
Coffin, right? Like
right. And they'll put it in a vehicle. And even once it goes into the vehicle, everyone's following the hearse, right? I'm just, this, but I want to underscore it for the people who are listening. Second, for coronation, you've got the person who's going to be crowned.
Right.
And that candidate, or for a ritual of cincture. Again, it's a procession. Or a wedding. Here comes the bride.
There's music.
Right.
Music
exactly.
for the procession. There's an emotion for the procession. And you want to piss people off or make a real mockery is at a wedding, play a funeral march, right? I mean, it'd be funny, but.
Well, now, okay. So you're coming back to this point with emotion.
Well, of course, it's a structured emotion. It's always a structured emotion. That's the whole purpose in it. It's a structured, focused emotion. And when you look at the whole society, especially in medieval, that's what I'm saying was so important. There were all of these nuances of structured emotions that they cultivated year in, year out as part of their everyday life, the structuring of emotions. And then if you look at what's one of the biggest things lacking today, but I don't want to get into a big statement like that because, the good old days or anything like that, but emotional structuring is a real issue. If we talk about, even when we talk about manhood, when we talk a lot of things. So just keep that in the back of your mind.
Well, no, I want to bring it to the front of the mind, because what you're talking about here opens up a whole vista. I mean, you and I have talked about it a little bit, but even now some new wheels are turning in my mind. I mean, how many people sit down? This is what I was talking about at the outset, right? You have the idea of a protest. I'm going to protest, so I'm angry. And I'm going to make my voice heard. And you have the idea of the upraised fist. And that is always what these, and that really is why.
I think it works to a certain degree.
It has a place. There's a place for an upraised fist. But the thing is that the upraised fist generates a certain type of reaction on the part of an onlooker, particularly an onlooker who isn't there and who's seeing it in a headline or in a video clip. And what I love about what you're talking about here is there's a whole vast range of emotions. And actually, you're putting into words what I couldn't quite.
It's for the people performing it. It's
right. You're talking about the technology of it and how it works as a tool within culture. But what I'm focusing on here is something that I wasn't able to articulate fully just a moment ago. Why I was upset about the tiki torches, because they made it an upraised fist thing, which is what everyone wants to react to. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that. Like you said, there is. And I absolutely agree with your statement. Sometimes you don't have to.
I mean, right? It works for them. And we got to test it.
Well, it didn't work for them. The entire event
has worked for
the left, right?
It has worked in the past.
But what I'm saying is, what happens?
It didn't work at all.
What happens if we sit down and we think of the way in which parades and processions as parades can be tuned and directed in such a fashion that they unfold and reinforce and express and structure some of these other emotions?
Exactly.
And what effect do they have?
Well, let's give you a good example. Haven't you noticed that all holidays nowadays are just an excuse to get drunk? It's the same holiday over and over and over. This was unheard of in the past.
Sure.
Every holiday had its processions usually, or procession and station, right? You go to people's houses and you sing carols, you go march. You have the Morris dancers, you have the procession, you have all of these. And every one of them was a cultivated emotion. And there was a time for Saturnalia. There was a time for drunken.
I was just going to say Saturnalia.
That was not the only emotion being cultivated. And right now, every single if it's Christmas, we'll go out and get drunk. New Year's, go out and get drunk. If it's 4th of July, go out and get drunk.
Bachelor's party, go out and get drunk.
Emotion, the same process. What's the effect of that? Okay, we could argue and discuss it, but I think it is worth discussing because it's something that I've always noticed is you're not really cultivating your emotions and your sense of self. You're doing the same thing all year long. And
nor are you even doing much to cultivate a sense of group identity, unless you want to be a bunch of drunken louts, right?
Now, and that's what a lot of them are,
And there are any number of different ways that we could take this. It's just the nature of the beast. As we talked about at the outset, there's so many different ways that processions apply in our lives and in our history. However, because I kind of wanted to focus this on the way that this cultural technology of processions that's so ancient, that's so widespread,
could do it today,
could be applied.
And I thought about that with burning, to start. I've got an idea, but again, it takes a lot of thinking, and it's kind of hard to it's got to have a way that it's spontaneous.
Well, it doesn't have to be spontaneous. It has to seem spontaneous for the people who are there.
Yes,
but
something there that gives rise to it. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that I noticed, there's a place from Reno to where Burning Man is actually located that I'm kind of surprised that in 25 years still, they don't quite have these symbolic stops. Now, when we went on the Rocio, by the time we get there, there's all of these incredibly symbolic stops, right? We're in procession with the Virgin. We're singing all the time. We stop.
Let me just tell people really quick. Rocio is, and I only know this because of Gerard, so it's silly for me to jump in, but you know it so well that basically a groups of brotherhoods, lay brotherhoods from all these different towns and cities across southern Spain and probably further afield. They come together, and over a 12-day period.
Well, no, it depends where you are. If you're Sevilla, you're close by. The whole thing is about 4 days.
So depending, but they carry they carry a figure of the Virgin.
No, she's pulled by 2 oxen, and we could talk about the symbolism of this.
Right, but I'm just trying to give people the basic understanding because you're going to tell this story.
There is the emblem, the banner's inside the thing.
No, but let me just tell them what the hell's happening first before you get into details. They carry a carreta with an image of the Virgin across the countryside to the town of Rocio, where all of those images of the Virgin are put in one building facing outwards like a wheel, and they each have their little niche.
Every brotherhood has its own.
Has its niche, right? And then everyone arrives at this, and Rocio means the dew.
The dew, which is very symbolic if you're a Catholic.
Right. So it's a ritual procession that takes place over a number of days that involves crossing the countryside, carrying an image of the Virgin across rivers and fields in a carreta, right?
And it ends up in the chaotic procession that's crazy.
Now I'll go back to the idea of discussing emotions and how this can be applied.
We would stop all along the way to these very important and sometimes emotionally moving stops, visits, certain things, and they were traditional for that particular brotherhood. And so I'm kind of waiting for the time. When is between the airport, between Reno and there's a whole long strip through the desert, about 2 hours, and there's already slowly emerging there some stops that are not symbolic yet, though, but they might be getting there. And then when you get to Burning Man, one of the things that you notice is that the music is totally, most of it is awful. And
most of it's coming out of speakers.
No music has evolved. Yeah, I would have to explain this to people. If you're sitting around with a bunch of Spaniards at the Rocio, even if they all of a sudden got together on a street corner, like we're waiting for the procession to move because it got stuck in traffic or whatever, we'll gather on a street corner and they'll just start singing and dancing, just like that. They don't
because they have a shared culture.
Exactly, it's a shared culture.
They haven't enjoyed as much diversification. Yes,
exactly. And the music is there, the emotional, and it can happen anywhere where people have never even met each other, and they're so attuned that their rhythms will go, just bam, they'll just lock in. So I'm waiting. How could something? I think what you're talking about, one of the first things we could do is create a right-wing processional pilgrimage, a Burning Man of the right wing.
Well, first off, don't Burning Man. I
think it's got a
just pro tip. If you, sure, there's a lot you can learn from it, but just little pro tip: if you want to pitch it to the right wing, you don't call it the Burning Man for the right wing. Just a small thing, because telling them they're going to go into the desert wearing antlers with fucking fun fur jumpsuits and they're going to watch it.
Wait, the antlers, man. I like the antlers. That guy at the Capitol building, I thought he would look cool as hell.
I thought he was a shitbird, but that's okay. We can agree to disagree. The
idea of going into the forest, making, and we have a history of that, of the Great Awakenings. That's my next group of videos that I'll be doing.
Talking about like Christian revivals?
Well, yeah, they're Christian revivalism, but the instinct is completely what Nietzsche pointed out.
Well, we're going to get a little bit far afield here. I want to stick with processions.
We have a history of this, but how can we make it updated? We go out into the forest. We create maybe a technological. I mean, I got a lot of ideas, but you go,
but still, you're already,
and we structure it, and we come out with a music that is uniquely our own.
Right. That's if you want to go out into the desert like Moses and carry your people with you, maybe that'll work. I'm thinking of something that's let's put much more modest 4 walls, floor, and a ceiling around the idea.
Burning Man started off with only 14 or 15 people, and look at it now.
Okay, you have a wonderful channel that I recommend everybody subscribe to, and on it you can pitch the idea of a right-wing Burning Man. For our purposes, I'm just saying that there are much more.
But it's not far away to say start off with 15 or 20 people, going there, talking, discussing.
Yeah, but if you want to talk about the Great Revival and stuff, we'll have to do it in a clip that isn't about processions.
They're hand in hand, though, right? Station and procession. Yeah.
For our purposes, for the right wing, so to speak, the right wing, if that even is a thing, I think there is a much more modest way to look at the potential in processions, which would be to have it.
That was my. Okay, so what do you think?
Which would be to have an event where you start at one location and you move to another location. There are points at which you stop along the way, and we can take some lessons from flamenco, which my dear friend Gerard introduced me to, where, and this, I know you want to talk about structured emotions, so this will provide an opportunity for that. In flamenco, you travel, you know this very well, I'm just going to reprise it for our listeners. I mean, I learned most of it from you. But in flamenco, you have the whole point that like you'll have what starts as a very, very dark and somber tientos, right? That will open up into a bright, happy at the end tangos, right? Or you will have, for example,
it can,
right, depending on the emotional modulation that they want to play with, right? These are different forms in flamenco, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, and in a performance, there's a certain rhythm and structure that tends to produce a given emotion, not strictly, and not always as deep as other times, but inherent within the forms are certain emotional expressions. And
it's the tango emotion. If you just call it that and don't try to say anything else, it's the tango emotion. Whatever happens.
Right, but some are brighter and some are darker, right?
Exactly.
So right, you could start with the Soleares, right, which is very dark and somber and individual, right, and then it can open up into a Bulerías at the end, right? Or in the alegrias, as we've talked
so
about many times.
We can call it dark, or we could just call it the emotion of solear, the emotion of solear.
But very few people listening know what solear is, right? Or a bulería.
We're going to label. Sometimes it's better so people understand that if you put the emotional label like name on it, you're kind of missing the point, because those things cultivate emotions. So what was,
but you're already
is not that emotion today.
Yes, but the point I'm trying to make in terms of the idea for a procession,
right,
is that you start with one emotion and it leads somewhere to the next one.
That's one way to approach it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look what happens with an alegrias.
Right.
You've got a silencio in the middle with the darkness.
Will have a focused emotion throughout the whole thing.
Right. But what I'm talking about is that, no, they don't have, even what you talked about, they don't have a focused emotion through the whole thing. Because when you talked about the whole thing of the controlled chaos at the end, when you arrived at that point, that was a different emotion than they had along the whole trip. If it wasn't different, it wouldn't have felt different to you.
Controlled chaos, I do it because they don't do it in every.
Was it controlled chaos the entire time?
No.
No, it wasn't.
But that's a whole different little something.
But all I'm talking about.
But as far as with the procession, changing emotions, it's at different stations. You could do it or you don't do it, and most of the processions don't.
Right. All I'm trying to underscore is that we have a number of opportunities that we can think about if we want to use this long-standing ancient cultural tool. And we both agree that the primary thing that happens in the so-called protest is the shaking fist. Oh, I'm angry. Black Lives Matter. You can always hear a fucking djembe in the background. Some fucking dreadlock shitbird with fucking fleas jumping off of him playing a fucking djembe. Black Lives Matter. There's one emotion.
It's so primitive. It's so
one emotion.
Right.
However, if you have the idea of stages that start somewhere and go somewhere. See, what I love, we talked about this at length before. I'm surprised that you're not hooking into it more, because with flamenco, you have the idea that there's an emotional journey that you take in watching what happens. You've got a soleares, right? The person sitting in the chair, right? The high back straight chair, and they're looking down in the darkness, right? The dancer, right? And it starts out all the shit that comes with that inward looking isolation that comes with I shouldn't say so. Right. And then, boom, at the end, somehow it unfolds and there's a bulería. It's a journey. It's not always that journey.
You want to pick things apart too, but that's not really, right? When they structure it, it didn't go that way. But that's all right. I see what you're going with.
It can be shown ritually with the fucking tablao aspect.
Right, mixing the emotions is one way to do it.
I'm not talking about mixing. Wait a minute. I'm not talking about mixing. You can gloss it that way. But I'm talking about you start somewhere and you fucking take them somewhere. Mm-hmm. The only thing that the leftists do is they bring them out, they get them to shake their fists, and if they're lucky, it'll explode into a spooge fest riot at the end.
Right. Here's the only thing I would say. What your idea is, it's great, and you were talking about mine was overly ambitious. Remember that these people don't have a structure. They don't have a common culture. We don't have that. So my thing is saying is by creating this space where people go to, we won't say the M word, go out there, and there they start. I
love the fact that it's abbreviated just like
yeah, I know. They start cultivating these emotions and these intellectual thoughts, and they bring it to fruition. And eventually, over some time, we bring it back as manifestations and processions.
Sure. If you want to do an Esalen Institute,
what are you gonna do? You're gonna tell them to teach them the songs?
No, you're not going to teach them the song. I'm saying that you have a certain mood that you attempt to create with the beginning of the procession. If I'm organizing let's just call it a parade, so it doesn't sound too esoteric, right? I'm going to say we're going to do a parade, and it's going to be to remember America, right? And we're going to have a first part of the parade where we commemorate the ideas of uncertainty. Right? The idea of going to war in a revolution against the world's greatest power, or at least greatest naval power, right? Britain at the time, vastly more powerful than these, this whatever it is in the New World, right? The colonies. There's the sense of threat. There's the sense that it could all be lost, that you're risking everything, right? Everybody has that within themselves. Everybody's experienced that. Anybody who's ever done anything for themselves knows what it's like. Tim used to talk about it as the moment when you're rock climbing and you come to an overhang, and there's a point at which you're kind of doing this underhanded grip thing, and you got to reach up over the overhang, and you just got to hope that your fingers stick on something once you reach up, or you're going to plummet, right? Everybody's had that experience, and therefore expressions of that emotion, the evocation of that emotion, is in potential within the people. Now, that could be the first stage, right? The second stage is, let's just make it really simple, right? The second stage is the
talk to the next statue and do,
and the next event that instead of this initial phase gives you the idea of there's a light at the end of the tunnel that isn't an oncoming train, that you still have to fight, but there is a possibility of a future. It's not absolute uncertainty. All that's required of you now is that you press on because victory is in sight. And then at the end, you have a third stage, because 3 acts always work, going all the way back to Aristotle or Sid Field's book on screenplays, right? You've got a 3-stage kind of arrangement where the first phase of it is the commemoration of this sense of uncertainty, the need to fight, and the risk that goes with it, and the feeling of risk. And then you carry them through to the second stage, which is you still got to fight. It ain't over yet. Stand together. The end is in sight. We can win. We just haven't yet, right? Third stage, we've won, right? Celebration. Now, I'm just throwing that out there as a very basic thing. That does not require shared songs. That requires certain set. Now, I absolutely
like oration, and I like that. It's oration. Yeah.
And I'm granting you
that. Yeah, I mean, I see where you're going with it. It's really interesting.
And I am granting you. I want to say this for the record, that yes, if you had shared songs and a shared culture and everything else, it would be more powerful. Yes, absolutely. But what I'm trying to underscore is that you can do it in phases and take people across an emotional journey. And then they come away prepared.
Year, it would get more and more sophisticated.
Right.
Certain music would keep repeating. They say, wow, this song really works. That one doesn't work so much.
And this is where I come in and apologize to you for making fun of Burning Man a little bit too much. For people who don't know, I'm joking around with Gerard. The reason he pays close attention to it is for the very reason that he just mentioned there, is because you can watch over time how a set of behaviors and practices gives rise to cultural superstructures and filigree and
right. So anthropology, it's a little petri dish. It's actually one.
Oh no, it's very much a petri dish. It's a petri dish. All kinds of shit grows in it. But yes, it is something. They do
have the toilets.
Pardon?
They do have the toilets.
Oh man, those in the Black Rock Desert, sitting there in the sun. But yeah, I was fucking with you a little bit too much. There is a very good reason to go there. There's quite a bit to be learned, and there are a lot of lessons that can be taken away from it that can be applied. So I'm definitely with you on that.
Yeah, there's everybody's got their it's not for to me. It's a particularly interesting thing, and there's a lot of things I can come around with it. It's a continuation of my studies from the Rocio.
Yeah, and I've been. I can't be throwing attitude. I've been to it.
The whole rise of the temple there is profound. So anyway, so like you said, I like what you're saying.
I'm just telling you.
It wouldn't be a procession in that sense yet. The first few times, it would be people gathering at a place, walking to the next, gathering. And yes, and then eventually you do it year after year after year. So you start figuring out what works and what doesn't. Yeah, I like that.
All right. Well, we have a little bit better than 30 minutes left, and we have a nice big long list. Sorry, I have to pour my chocolate milk here. We have a nice big long list of things that you were kind enough to put together in that outline, and I want to just look over some of them.
And does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, well, we probably let's leave the last 30. That's a good call, actually. Let's we're going to call for questions that will start in about 6 minutes. So get your questions coming, and let us know whether or not you want to watch our crazy asses continue to talk about the idea of processions in further clips, because
we covered the only thing, if we want to, is the Nietzschean. There's nothing really much more that we haven't at least skidded on. We pretty much hit all of the major points. And for a first time conversation on this subject, I think we did rather, considering, like I say, it's pretty vast.
Yeah, it's enormous. Yeah. Looking at this, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff in the Dionysian that I think deserves, because of your thing with music as well. We're not just talking about with you. We're not just talking about somebody who studied processions. You're also deep, up to your eyeballs in music. That may well warrant its own consideration all by itself. If you
Into the Forest.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about in future. But yeah, right. Under what you call section 6 here with all the stuff from
Nietzsche, the Dionysian procession, and the Greek chorus, blah blah.
That we could talk about in future. I don't know if you could fit it into 6 minutes.
Well, the idea is a simple process that they would go into the forest, away from social order. And this is what I would say. I like what you came up with. I'm looking at it from the other point of view, that we would go out of the social order as we know it and start reconstructing our own cultural values out there, away from society, away from culture, where we and profoundly, right? I'm not putting anything off the table as far as going Dionysian.
And really what you're talking about here is an exercise in parallelism, really, fundamentally, right?
It could lead to that, yeah. But the main thing is the experience, that we have the experience, that we start to understand in Revelation, and everything will follow from that. So he called it to encounter the paradox that lies at the heart of existence. People have this periodic urge. It just brings them out of the people. And I call it when the society starts to get toxic. They will move into the forest, or too transparent, which is almost the same thing. Move into the forest, and this is all over the world. And there they may stay 3 days, 3 nights, 2 weeks, whatever. And they'll preach, they'll sing, they'll dance, they'll talk, they'll sing and dance. And they do this, and they bring themselves, they're cultivating an emotional state that they're trying to get in touch with something. They're trying to feel reality at a deeper level.
It is. It's like the revivals that we used to have across America.
The Dionysian procession, as expressed here in America.
Right, and actually, I gave you short shrift, because that actually
wow, they got very crazy. See, people don't talk about that much.
No, I was actually reading Frances Trollope's book on the U.S. that was written in the 1830s, where she was talking about the revivals that happened out in the countryside with the massive bonfires and people going fucking apeshit. Exactly. And again, I gave you a little bit short shrift, so I apologize.
Spirit, right?
Because it's also like the Hydra. I was thinking that it wasn't quite a procession, but it is. It's a procession where the station that you stop at just happens to be a little longer. You proceed out of the zone of the imposition of the cultural norms. And you stay in the other place.
There's winning procession. We don't know that. In Spain, we know they do, because we're still doing it.
Right.
But we don't know how they got to there, because my guess is they did go in something similar to a procession, even if it was horseback, singing all the way there. My guess is that they had a ritual, a semi-ritual structured way of getting together and going there.
Absolutely. Well, look at Chaucer's thing, right? With the Canterbury Tales, they're telling stories as they travel,
and they're singing, and that's another thing they don't talk about. There's a lot of songs. Pilgrimage songs are a huge part of Western civilization. I mean, we spent entire books on that. Just the pilgrimage songs. Well, look at the Rocio. Rocio created a whole genre of music.
Right. So your idea is to go out this Dionysian thing, to go into the forest?
A parallel society, or an anti-structure to what's going on today, is to have something like this, where we go into the forest to really feel what we're missing here and recreate it at a deeper level. So we come back going, oh yeah, now I know what to do. But I like your approach too, though. That could work.
Well, mine's a little less profound. It's just the idea of applying it in a sequence on a path.
You do it over time, though, that could really be powerful.
All right. So that covers the basic idea that you lost as Nietzsche.
Procession, and how it according to Nietzsche, evolved into the Greek chorus, and how he hates that. That's something else. The fact is, the into the forest to encounter the paradox that lies at the heart of existence, and it's orgiastic And music is always the Dionysian medium. And then the Apollonian is after all this insanity, you're almost crazy. It's toxic, right? When you confront reality totally, like the word awful and awesome, it's as awful as it is awesome. And then how do you deal with this? Well, you rhapsodize it according to Nietzsche, and that's where we get Apollonian arts. Put it into a nice form, put the music into very balanced, and seeing morality, get it to, and that's nice too. We need that. That's good too. But the Dionysian is you go out there and you tear everything up, your social structures, and try to really get to the heart of existence. And so something like that is what I'm thinking would be really good for
everyone to explore as an idea, right? Right. I mean, and actually coming
recreate culture and stop. It can't be all intellectual. It can't be reading another book. It can't be reading another. And my techno-anarchism theory, this is a critical part, is this must be part of any techno-anarchist approach in creating what I call a bolt.
Well, then we have a number of different ways that people could approach this. We've touched, we've leapt all over the place in a toe dipping fashion with a number of different aspects of this. The important thing that I want to underscore again before we turn to questions, I do want to underscore again, now is the time to ask questions. Put a big semi-agog with the questions, and we will attempt to answer them in our remaining 30 minutes.
When we talked about, you said that the emotion, the chaotic one, when you press any emotion to its extreme, that's what the chaotic emotion is. And then it brings out all the others, which is one of the things you can look at music with. You hit the tone and there's all the other tones. So it often does its opposite. And that's what I experienced. When you get to that chaotic emotion, you're cultivating the same one all the way there. And most of the times they don't go to the chaotic, but the Andalusians do pretty often. And when you get there, it's not really a different emotion. I mean, it is. It's the total deconstruction of the emotion you went there with. And then instead of being sad, you might be breaking out laughing and screaming, laughing hysterically. You see that, laugh till you cry or cry till you laugh or something like that. When you push the emotion to extreme enough, it starts to trigger the other emotions. And that's what I mean. You would use, though, a single focused emotion to get there.
Well, just for you're talking about things that verge into the realm of like initiatory and this sort of thing.
Lucia, it's common practice.
Absolutely, but you have, as you yourself pointed out, you have a cultural and to a considerable extent ethnic homogeneity, right? And these things have existed for centuries,
exactly,
and have been built and built upon.
Why they never stampede? That's
right. As fragmented as we are, where we are here in the United States, we probably can't expect that sort of thing. However, there are a number of things, if you pick certain groups, right? If you, for example, wanted to do a Christian revival with a number of Protestant Baptists, right? You probably could find a range of people who are Baptists
but I would look at transformational festivals and say,
absolutely. I'm just telling you.
They are kind of doing it.
Right, but I'm just telling you that
for that.
Good luck going out and trying to get a big quote unquote right-wing following for people, and you're like, hey, you know what we'll do? I didn't say that you can't have a festival. Hang on, let me finish the thought. The idea is that you can't get out there and tell them, hey, guess what we're going to do? We're going to push your emotions to the absolute limit, at which point you'll be crying and laughing, but laughing and crying. I don't think you're going to get that many people to sign up for it.
It would happen.
That's always a thing for the few, not for the many.
Oh, that's in other societies, the communal ecstatic.
Exactly, in other societies that are not as balkanized as ours.
Okay, but
do you really want to fucking pop the
I would say we could get 100, 200 right-wing people, and look, you experienced that. Remember the mosh pits? That's just insane. It was total, but they never went so far. Nobody really got killed. Nobody really got hurt. But Jesus, it looked like it, didn't it? It looked like somebody was going to get their head cracked, but they didn't.
Yeah, I remember the first time I stage dived. Yeah. But you do find out there are people who'll move out of your way. Stage diving is fine as long as you land on people. But if they really hate you and they see you climbing up on the stage again and you piss some people off, they just move out of the way when you jump and you hit the. Yeah. So anyway, that's a different thing. Okay, so questions. Do we have any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Otherwise, I'm just going to ramble here with my old friend Gerard. So if you have questions, address them. And let me see actually if I missed any up here.
We're just saying, like, what the fuck are they talking about?
No, we got some people who dig it, man. JollyScholar888, great guest. Absolutely, he is. He is a long time old.
Someday we got to tell him our story, Oliver.
No,
we need to play an American Odyssey.
You want to talk about one motorcycle trip like everybody will care about it.
Wait a minute. It was.
It was all right.
Is it one of your favorite things today, flamenco?
Say what?
Is it one of your favorite things today, flamenco?
Absolutely. But
how did that happen? How did that happen?
Well, no, the flamenco came later, man. I had that.
That's where I really came
that's where you learned it. So it stands out for you.
I brought you to it, but that was
I was chasing Otmar Liebert's wife.
Man, it's a great story. We got to do this.
No, we're not. We don't have to tell that story.
Journey to Santa Fe, an American Odyssey.
No, the flamenco started later when I was freaking out. Remember, because I had broken up with that girl, and you called me and you were like, "Man, everything is fucked up. Listen to me, man. Come up to DC. I'm doing this big concert. Check it out." And,
but the only reason I could do that is because of that trip.
All right. Here's a question, I think. Confusion and delay. You have caused confusion and delay. A semigod, what is known about the inspiration that led to processions taking root in culture in the first place? Well, I'll let Gerard answer in a second. My quick answer is that there is no first place because it goes back into the animal roots of our behavior, that we see them with herds and all sorts of things. So I'm not sure there is a beginning in the most basic sense. Gerard, what do you think?
Yeah, cultivating the ecstatic experience is really where all the processions tend to, like I said, when I talk about the chaotic emotion, you can also work it backwards by creating and cultivating the emotions. And possibly that was done around fires, but it also could have been done, I would think, more around fires that then led to the procession. But I don't know. And I say, nobody knows yet. We'll probably never know exactly because it's some kind of back and forth. It's kind of, as one moves, the other one moves. As one moves, if the whole procession, if the emotional cultivation at a station gets to a certain degree, they want to move. They want to go and take it. They want to. That's one way to imagine it. So, but also, what you're asking is, it's easy, as Oliver said, to build upon a building block that's already there, to march in procession to your enemies. You raise up music that says we're going to go kill those bastards. Like
the primates you were talking about initially, right?
And then you raise the energy and you go, and as you go, you're raising more energy.
And there's
death, right? Then you take the body to where it's going to go. So yeah, it's a give and take, and I don't think it's one or the other because they evolve together.
And I would add in the business of orientation in space. Like, one of the things that people think about is, okay, if you've got animals, right, and you've got animals moving together to cooperate to do something. We've all seen, a group of lions can surround an animal. A group of hyenas can surround an animal. We've all seen it, in nature programs. We know it can happen. Now, how do you get from that kind of cooperative behavior to cooperative behavior that involves sound? Because then, if you've got cooperative behavior that involves sound, then
you have a lot in ethology. You have the wolves doing that. I saw a confrontation between ducks and other creatures. I think they were
right. Absolutely, they involve sound, and that's what I was just going to cover. Is that what you get is the idea that when your eye is on the ball, like I remember when I got this group of guys with knives who surrounded me in Istanbul, and I had to get out of that. And I remember looking at them, and I kept thinking, I'm the soccer ball. Because the fundamental metaphor that most people in most countries use to cooperate around a central object is football, or soccer as we call it in the US. That's the way they get trained in our current age, right? And what happens is, if you're looking at the object, but you're cooperating with the rest of this group in order to deal with that object, you need to be able to know where they are in space, but keep your eyes on the thing you need to keep your eyes on. And that's the need for cries. at different positions from the cooperating animals.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely would be a nice one. That as they're moving towards the attack, and this one's making a sound here and sound there.
And you know their position without taking your eye off of what you need to keep your eyes on. And I've also, when I've looked at the way in which sound can be used without, strictly speaking, language in order to integrate behavior in space. If you're in the smoke of battle as a line of Romans is coming forward to engage with Carthaginians, right? And the fact is you've got so many people out here, it's very dry weather, so they're kicking up huge clouds of dust. And what happens is, with things like double enveloping, that it's very important that you keep your ranks in a certain position. If you're going to do double enveloping and Hannibal's going to fall back before the Romans, it has to appear to be receding so that the people come forward thinking the line's going to break and then they can be surrounded. Well, in order to fucking do that, you have to know where your flanks are relative to your position as you withdraw. Now, how do you do that without sound while at the same time making sure you don't take a pilum in the eye or a gladius in the neck, right? It's with sound, especially when you can't see in the confusion of battle.
All sound signals are just
right.
Yeah, it's a
so I think to answer the question about the inspiration, processions taking root in culture, much of it comes from animal behavior, and in particular, though it didn't get explicitly said when Gerard was talking about sitting around a fire and the rest, he was thinking about also the musical and rhythmic dimensions
that cultivating an emotion.
Right.
And then you can change that emotion. See, that's what really gets self-modification, where we start moving from being an animal to a human, is when we say, regardless of what the environment is doing, we're going to do this emotion. We're going to do ah la la.
Right. Now that's another one. That's a very important point, because
now the guy puts the beat. We're going to do this beat, and then we're going to do this melt. And you're cultivating deliberately your state of mind, your emotion,
right, like a cadence,
independent of the environment. This, to me, was the first where humans started to become human, and where the first rituals structuring the human self began.
And I think you can see it with the primates, right? Like where, for example, a chimpanzee, one of these apes, picks up a stick and begins to beat the ground and flail and do all this sort of dominance display stuff. And it involves building up their energy to threaten and seem intimidating, just like a cat that fluffs its fur out in order to look bigger, right? In order to intimidate its enemy. And at the same time, as you begin to move over from primates, perhaps into hominids and perhaps into humans, you get to this point where you're going to be afraid to confront an enemy in a given circumstance. And so you want to replace the emotion of concern and fear with the emotion of aggression and certainty and dominance. And so then you get the need to be like, right? To build as a group.
Is the point where cultivating a state of mind is itself a pleasure. And they do it for the pleasure of it.
Even if they don't have to go fight. Right. You're just talking about the next step down the line.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Where we really start becoming human is we're self-modifying our own emotions for the pleasure of it. And then we start getting nuanced.
Or for the curiosity of it.
Or expanding what Niels Whalen would call the emotional repertoire.
Right. Well, look at teenagers doing all kinds of crazy drugs like I did. I didn't exactly do it for the pleasure of it. If you asked me, maybe I would have said that. But
the adventure, the excitement.
Right. But adventure, we know what adventure is. Adventure is something that maybe sucked when you were doing it, but is great to talk about later. Right. So, it's the idea to push the limits, to learn new.
Push the limits. And when you push the emotional limits, you're pushing the consciousness with it. You're expanding consciousness. It's an inevitability. As you expand the emotional repertoire, you're expanding the consciousness of the human being. At least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, yes. All right. Well, we have another question here, and I'm going to welcome more. We still have better than 15 minutes left. The next one we have here, any questions you want to ask, put a semiagog at the beginning in all caps. It'll be easy for me to find it. I'm sorry if I missed anybody's. Please do put a big fat semiagog there. I'm a couple apple juices in.
He's asking the question that we really were talking about. How can you, without being fake and superficial, how can we research and make use of this social, cultural, technological tools to our advantage? That's a great question, Pulaco82. And it's what we're trying to figure out. how would we do this? And we were talking about that. He had a different approach than I did. Mine was to actually pursue the ecstatic experience, go into the force, the Dionysian, and his was more of Apollonian, that we actually start with structured responses. And I thought your idea was great. And then you move through it, and over time, they'll get more structured and become a ritual, a tradition, whatever.
Right. And for my part, also, the point is that just a very, very straightforward, simple thing. Everybody who thinks about doing a march, right? Because there are this is a semantic game with linguistics, right? You can call it a march, you can call it a protest, you can call it a procession, right? You can call it each one of these things carries a certain contextualizing framework, right? If we say march, we think it's probably political, and if it's not military, right?
Yeah.
If we say it's a parade, it's a holiday, and it's a festival, and it's a celebration, right? Each one of these constructions carries its own framework. So when we on the right consider how processions can be used politically, the common way is to think of it, well, it's going to be a march and it's going to be a protest, right? By putting those names on it.
What you're saying is not, and I like that. Yeah.
Right, which is basically just breaking the emotional framework, which is aggression and resentment.
Yes.
The left is always, the engine it runs on is aggression and resentment. You know, resentment as resentment or whatever, as Nietzsche talked about.
Exactly.
Right. So
and I was thinking that we could do, if we're going to do a protest, it's going to be done right.
It's going to be done very far to the right. Yes.
Yeah, it's going to make a real impact.
No, but the point is that what happens when a bunch of people are expecting, and that's why I'm going to come back to it, because I feel like I didn't get the point across. What happens when they're expecting a torch-lit march at night full of adolescent anger and resentment, and instead they get a quiet candlelit vigil?
Or a sophisticated, grand, noble boom right in your face. Here we are, and it's grand and it's noble, and even they feel it, and they're going,
right. What happens? Here's one for you. What the fuck happens when they're expecting a bunch of right-wing freakazoids and there's a whole fucking orchestra moving with them?
Exactly. That's
like, what do they do? What do they do then? How do you dismiss that?
What the feeling is so good that they feel it.
Because it's musical.
The rhythm is so good. The feeling is so good. The visual is so powerful. They feel it.
Instead of carrying a sign, you've got an orchestra. But note that I said an orchestra rather than something that could be construed as a military band, right?
No, I'm saying that with the new electronics, an orchestra takes on a whole different definition. When you're in a procession with the new electronic devices, you can do some magical things.
Yes. We'll leave the window open.
Mr. Paluca82, he was talking about gathering/games. Could he elaborate a little bit on that? I wonder if he's talking about like what we would say maybe bulerías, or in hip hop would be.
Well, no, he says Mora. I don't know, but shanties. Like there's this one in particular that he's probably thinking about that I've seen.
I mean, no sailing shanties.
Right.
Event like a fandango. See, a fandango is not just a form; it's the actual event.
Right. I don't know where are you getting fandangos?
No, well, it's not there. But I'm saying shanties. I'm saying, is he suggesting that shanty is like fandangos? It's actually an event, because he says gathering/games.
I'm not sure, and I'm not sure about games.
Could he respond to us?
Yeah, we'll see what comes in, but yeah, somebody Palooka is saying Mora is an ancient hand game that I'm not familiar with.
It's done rhythmically. Is that what he's saying?
No, he just said it's an ancient hand game, so I don't know one way or another.
Yeah, but you talk about music. You see, we have a lot of these. We have sword dances that were done really. They're very complicated with music. The fandango is a dance and a gathering. You say, like, I'm going to a party, I'm going to a fandango. And the games, remember, what is it in hip? I'm so sorry that my brain is doing this, but in hip hop, it's called where you try to diss each other. You outwit each other in front of the audience. Right. There's a word for that. In bulerías, that's what bulerías used to be a lot of ways. The singers would sit there and make fun of each other in bulerías.
Right, or the dancers. Like, remember, well, you weren't there, but when I saw Jesus in Long Beach, there was this point at which this like late middle-aged lady who was a little plump, they were doing a bulerías, and she hopped up and she did like a little patata thing for just a second, and then just like, of course, perfectly on beat, as you're well familiar with, she just fucking turned, walked over to the bar, sort of threw back a drink, and went and sat down because it was like perfectly timed to be like, what? You left? You were in the middle of it and you just left? Right. So yeah, there's that sort of
aimed at the audience. But how about aimed at another dancer? Like, take that.
Right. Now, Moras looks like a hand game, dates back thousands of years. Each player simultaneously reveals their hand. So it looks like some sort of collective interaction.
But is it related to music is what I was wondering.
Not that I can see. It's a finger hand game.
About the break, whatever the thing that in hip hop is, of course, music is a big part. And in the bulerías, it's a musical gathering, but it's also a gathering of a game. Then there's hopscotch, which is people playing a game that's completely musical. Sarah La Candela used to talk a lot about that, how girls that grew up with that, developing a musical sensibility and rhythmic. Rope dancing, too, very similar.
Right. Let's see what. Thank you, Palooka. We answered as best we could. I'm sorry that with the moral part we don't know more. Let's jump over here to Ace Pilto, who makes fun of me for my affection for 25 ACP. Says Semigog, wouldn't an attempt to recreate the Burning Man phenomena in the right-wing mindset be a futile effort to make procedurally nature people behave like? I'm going to try to interpret this. Wouldn't an attempt to recreate the Burning Man phenomena relative to the right-wing mindset end up being a futile effort, given that these people are focused on procedure and they wouldn't want to behave like progressive types?
No. The whole I see what he's saying, but again,
what is he saying?
He's saying that you're going to look at it superficially with a group of directives. But it's the opposite. Burning Man didn't evolve that way. Burning Man could have gone any direction whatsoever. It happened to went to the direction it did. It just started off some people. Let me give an example. In the early days, it was so wild. People would drive backwards at 90, 100 miles an hour. And sometimes they would accidentally run over people in the night. And then those two aren't related. They would sometimes roll over and they would run backwards. They would also put propane tanks and go by in convertibles.
Sure, you're just pointing out that it was wild, and that's what he's saying.
Well,
he's saying
going to experience, and there was a lot of contesting. It went very hippie, but that was contested every step of the way.
Right, but I'm not sure that you're answering his question, because it sounds like what he's saying is you take people who by nature are focused on procedure and are having them behave like progressives.
Yeah, I don't see those labels as being very meaningful. We're human beings. If we go into the forest, that's a natural thing where we go and deconstruct society and renew ourselves.
So
people do.
So you think the sort of more conservative types in the U.S. Want to go in the forest and reinvent themselves?
Well, I'll tell you right now, people are shocked by the fact that 20%. Burning Man does censuses. People were shocked that nearly 20% identified themselves as Republicans. Those are the ones that admitted it. I mean, who would think? I would have never thought that.
Why wouldn't they? So what you're telling me is that it's 80% not Republicans.
Exactly, but there's enough. As I'm saying, you're saying that conservatives wouldn't do this. I would say that's not true.
You're saying that
even as going out there with the crazy hippies with the progressives, you still got a fairly large number going.
20%.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. If you
sure, I'm like that. Like you,
do 20% progressive people go to a Trump rally? Hell no.
Sure, but remember that like a lot of people who consider themselves or who might vote Republican consider themselves to be libertarians. So, I mean, in our current day and age, I'm not sure what that means. My point is only
just 40 years ago were massive, and even today they're massive. These revival movements stuff. I don't see any. No, it could. Again, nobody planned Burning Man, right? The fact that it grew the way it did is because it was a natural impulse that just happened to take on. It started off with 15 or 20 people.
Right, but you're talking about a natural impulse. Well, we have
natural instinct of all human beings.
You have a natural instinct. Not everyone wants to go out into the middle of the desert and burn a man in effigy.
You don't need everybody. You don't need everybody.
Sure, but what I'm saying is you've got a situation where the culture is so fucked that is the closest thing to a genuine experience that they can find.
Had on Andalusian culture, massive. How many Andalusians actually went to the Rocio? I've been there. I've asked them. They're shocked that I, as an American, have been there. Most of them have never gone. They all know about it. They all can dance sevillanas because they have no choice. But
you're talking about a Catholic ritual, and you're talking about a bunch of like dreadlock people hanging out around porta potties and burning an effigy of a giant human being.
Man, you did. If you go and see,
I've been.
It's I got a different take from that you did. I go with a temple, and it's really profound, deeply profound.
And what did it generate? What did it generate?
Hey, it's proliferating all over the world.
Have you ever heard a poem? Was there? Did anyone ever write a poem about it?
Tons. There's books, there's poems, there's movies, there's documentaries. It's becoming a cultural phenomenon.
Poems.
Surface.
There are poems about Burning Man.
Oh my gosh, millions.
Millions of poems about Burning Man.
But not millions, lots. Okay.
I don't know, man.
There's a Burning Man in Spain right now, and that's what's so.
That's just
the field that I go to, as you know, in South Carolina. It's there's 3 or 4 there's regionals.
Right, but I just I understand why you went. There's a very good reason for it.
Proliferation, right? That's part of my
absolutely. But the whole, from my perspective, the proliferation is based on the fact that everything's fucking falling apart, and in the absence of a real culture, many people are so desperate that they'll put up with that crap.
Healthy instinct. They're reinventing.
Absolutely, it's a healthy instinct.
Right.
The instinct's absolutely healthy, but the fact that you have to eat regurgitated vomit off the floor when your hunger is a good instinct.
I didn't see that. I saw it as pretty cool. My experience, because they were the lamplighters. I had a different experience, but yeah. So I'm saying we need to recreate culture. And
that's the problem. That's the problem. Right-wing people don't want to recreate culture. They want to go back to the one that exists.
It's the same thing. We're rejuvenated our own. It's a revival, right?
Well, no. Recreation.
They didn't recreate Christianity. They revived it and added a little bit to it.
Well, revival and recreation are 2 very different words. You just smoothly fucking shuffled sideways from recreate to revive.
I mean revival. Okay.
Revive.
All right.
Fair enough. Okay, I don't know that we have. If we do have another question, I saw there was one I missed, but we are. Look at men like God saying that Ollie's been heavy on the drink. I've been drinking a little bit. Because I'm talking to my dear old friend.
I think I'm wasted.
No, you're not. What are you talking about? And hasn't seen Oliver so fired up? I'm talking this way because I'm talking to a dear old friend of mine. I have known.
We have conversations like this. This is what we do.
I have known Gerard actually.
You were 17 at the time.
I was fucking 16, dude.
16.
Holy shit!
They have no idea
about
activate, do they?
No, and we can stop right there.
Oh man,
we can stop right there.
Sticker then color.
They're saying that this should go to a 2-part stream, man. I don't know what we would talk about next. We could shut the dream. We could shut the stream down and keep talking. I don't know what we would talk about next.
In terms of processions, we did pretty well with it.
Yeah, I think we covered most of that part.
We got to the gist and we got to the problem. How can
we have 1 minute, actually less than 1 minute left. Do you think, this is a simple yes or no question, because I want to plug you at the end and say goodnight to everybody. Do you think that there's enough in this for us to talk about it more?
Oh yeah, it's just been doing. Yes, there's more. Just give me a while to think about it.
No, and I need to do it too. We both just dove into this.
From my point of view, yes. go deeper into the Dionysian Apollonian contrast and the fact that the procession is what that theater evolved from the demon. See, if you make the link that the
You're running out of time.
Is the Greek chorus tamed, which is what Nietzsche hated about it. That's a great conversation right there.
27 seconds. Okay. Well, then, if I get enough comments saying that we should do more, then I'll do it. And I'll certainly, in any case, I'm going to be talking to Gerard plenty of times in future for sure. He's going to be a regular on here. So thank you all very much for being here. I am Semiagog, and check out Gerard's channel, and I am out.